For our next panel, we have Megan Bouchier, the moderator of our next panel. In 2007, a 2007 graduate of our law school. She started her career as an associate at Lathan and Watkins. Today, she is the managing director of the San Francisco office at Sard, Verbinnen & Co., where she advises clients on a variety of special situations, including complex litigations and crisis situations, mergers and acquisitions, activist shareholder situations, and senior management change. It's my pleasure to welcome Megan, who will introduce her panelists.
Really thrilled to be here today and have a chance to speak with three incredibly impressive women who I'm going to invite up to the stage. You know, as you can tell from the title of the panel, they have all navigated their way to the top, but they have all done it in really unique and distinct ways on really different career paths, and I think we'll have a lot of interesting insights to share with us. So first I'll have Sandra Stern, if you want to come up. UCLA Law class of 79, the current president of Lionsgate Television Group. If you look her up online, you will find that she has overseen massive growth at Lionsgate since she joined in 2003, and that she oversees all legal, business affairs, production, distribution, financing, strategic planning, acquisitions, deal making, relationship building.
It's exhausting.
Forging new business models and financing in the ever-changing world of television. I was exhausted reading about it. It did not sound simple. She has also a multi-year winner of the Variety Women Impact Award and added to the Women in Entertainment Power 100 by Hollywood Reporter. So excited to have Sandra join. Thank you.
Nice to be here.
Thanks. And Lauri Shanahan, who some of you may have gotten to see earlier today in the breakout session on boards. She is also a UCLA Law alum, class of 87. She had an early stint in construction law and made her way over to Gap Inc., where she was general counsel. She was at Gap for 15 years. She is now serving on multiple boards of really awesome, exciting brands that I would love to maybe get some free stuff after this. We've got Cedar Fair Entertainment, a home to Knott's Berry Farm in my favorite Great America, up where I live in the Bay Area. Decker's Outdoor, which has brands like UGG and Teva, and Treasury Wine Estates, which has brands like Behringer and Stag's Leap and many others. So everyone will, I'm sure, want to talk to Lauri about that afterwards. And also Lily Hughes, who is actually a graduate of Berkeley Law, but she has since become a committed Southern Californian, so we're happy to welcome her here today. Lily also really interesting different career paths. She started out in private practice at Manat, doing financial services work just in time for the crash of '89, was there for 10 years, took a sidestep into nonprofit where she was a director at City of Hope Cancer Center, ended up going back into corporate life, spent more than 15 years at global tech giant Ingram Micro as associate general counsel, and then 4 years ago moved over to Public Storage, where she is currently general counsel. It's a $36 billion REIT, S&P 500 company. It's really like a lot of different experiences there that I'm excited to ask about. So thank you guys all for being here. I think I wanted to start out by asking you to think back to your graduation day from law school and wondering if you had a vision at that time for where your career would take you and sort of how that compares to where you are now and like what's been the most, I guess, surprising, or maybe you're exactly where you thought you would be.
Well, I think I can probably answer that because I graduated in '79 at a time when there really was not a real entertainment law practice, a real business. I took NIMR on copyright, and I think that was the only entertainment class, certainly at UCLA. So it had never occurred to me that entertainment would be a a path that I would follow. Coming from Brooklyn, we had absolutely no idea that such a thing even existed. So my career path was a little circuitous. I started as a litigator, realized I was a really dreadful litigator, no talent whatsoever, but had a graduate degree in literature. And when I started talking around to various people, I discovered that there actually was such a thing as entertainment law and jobs at studios. And so that was a very surprising path for me to follow. I had no idea 40 years ago when I graduated that I would be here.
So when we were posed this question, I think my first response, which is what I'm going to go with, is I really didn't think. I didn't have, a vision. I think in terms of where I was going to end up, I was kind of the dutiful daughter who went to law school because that's what my dad wanted me to do. And I'm not proud of that, but I think when I graduated, I had done an externship. I'd done an externship at a law firm in the construction law group, and I really loved this group of guys. They were really fun, and we did a lot outside during that summer when I interned there. And I went back, and I just thought that's where I was going to spend the rest of my life. How I ended up at Gap was a friend of mine at the law firm's sister was a recruiter at Gap, and I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that. I'm fine. I ended up just, submitting my resume and feeling like a horrible, disloyal employee, and that I was doing that. Ultimately, interviewed with my soon-to-be boss, and was just kind of snared by the irreverence and this culture that was nothing like the experience that I had at the law firm. And I had worked with really great people, and I think in retrospect, I realized I really loved the people and didn't really get a lot of passion and joy out of what I was doing. So then I ended up at Gap, and we can talk more about that later.
Yeah, and Lily, I wanted, in particular, I just think it's so interesting how you have made a number of what appear to be big industry jumps, and would love to know how you navigated that, and how do you even make those decisions, and then how did you go about ensuring they would be successful transitions?
Sure, and maybe let me just share my story, probably decades even before then. So my origin story, I'm actually an immigrant. I'm the first in my family to actually have graduated from grade school, high school. I moved to Los Angeles when I was 11 with my family. And actually, my mother was illiterate even in Chinese, and my father had a grade school education. I was the oldest, I'm still the oldest, of three. And so when I moved here to Los Angeles, to East Los Angeles in Lincoln Heights with my family as immigrants, we hit the lottery at that time. We did get the immigrant visa lottery in 1974. And I translated everything from Chinese to English and back and forth. So that kind of was my background. I had no, lawyers or professional mentors who created a path for me to aspire to. But certainly education was something that my parents, that was why they gave up their whole life in order to come to the United States for a better future for their children. So for me, it was either, really do well in school or not. And so that was kind of the underlying passion. And so law school was a decision point for me. It was either law school or business school. And I decided to go to law school because I knew I wanted to do transactional work and actually, frankly, to get into securities deals. So this was 1988 when I graduated. In fact, Rachel Moran was teaching at Berkeley at the time, and actually she was a professor of mine, so just sort of how the world turns. My very first project at the law firm, which was a firm prior to Manat, was how to create a good bank, bad bank. And at the time, that was really my focus of practicing, which was to be a securities lawyer, governance, M&A, and then also to understand financial services. So I really developed that expertise. And then sometimes in life, you just don't know. And I think, frankly, after I made partner at Manat, it was a, now what? It's like you worked so hard. I had so many all-nighters. And then when I reached to be a partner, I had to really sort of pivot and think about building a book of business. It's really a different skill set, right? To be a really great lawyer versus being a really great business developer. So at the time, I had received a phone call from a former colleague at Manat, and City of Hope was a big client then, for me to, get into the nonprofit world to test it out. And that is one of the advice that I would share with folks who are, just don't even know where you are and where you're going. And sometimes you really need to take a chance, and for me, I took a chance. I went there. I was really bored. I mean, within 3 months, I really realized, that was not the right kind of path for me in the future. Loved nonprofit. Was very involved in American Heart. Great for me to do as a hobby and supporting community service, but not as a career. So frankly, I arrived at Ingram Micro through an ad in the Daily Journal. And it was just one of those, serendipity things that happened. They were, at the time, 1996, spinning out from a company out of Nashville, and actually had the largest IPO in California at the time, raising almost $400 million, which was quite a large sum at that time. So they needed somebody with my background to help build the first really legal team to comply with the regulations of a public company. So it was really a fantastic, learning, drinking from the fire hose when I joined them as a new public company, and then grew with them over almost 18 years when they grew into a Fortune 100 company, with 30,000 employees, selling in 150 countries. And by the time I left, I was head of the global M&A and doing lots of new deals. Then pivot to public storage, a completely different industry. It's a REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust. Really, we are one of the largest, essentially, landlords in the world because we actually own the real estate, and so that's why the company is on the S&P 500, very valuable. And frankly, a lot of the skill sets, taking risks, being able to have good business judgment, and really being curious to learn, those are things that I had, from the very beginning of my career, and I continue to be very curious and love to learn. So that is really kind of the various pivots in my life. And I have to just, for the people who are in law school or who are still mid-career or maybe even junior career, I would say you have a long runway. Take chances. You have an idea of where you want to go, but it's the connections and the network. You don't even know where you're going to go. Sow the seeds every day. Build quality relationships, because that's what will take you to wherever the new doors is going to be next.
That actually kind of flows well into the next question I wanted to ask about, which is on the side of winning friends and influencing people. You don't get to the positions that you three are in today without having pretty deft people skills and being able to build meaningful relationships. And I might just start with you, Sandra, because the notoriously sort of relationship-driven world of Hollywood and deal-making in particular, would love to know more about sort of how you've approached that in your career and how you think about it.
Well, it is true. Hollywood and the TV business are relationship-driven businesses. I had an experience today driving back from the airport. We're in the middle of pilot season. We cast an actress. The agent wanted me to make her pay or play, which is standard, and I couldn't do it. And he said to me, well, what am I going to say to my client? I said, you've known me for 30 years. Trust me. And we closed the deal. That's something that you build up over time. It's one of the things that I always tell the junior people, the young people starting out who work for me. You want to build a career so that when you say, trust me to people, they will, right? It's your word and your integrity are really the things that help you create those relationships. We talk a lot about how in many ways it's a lot easier for men in the industry because there are sort of natural things that they do. They go to ball games together, they golf together. It's one of those social things. I know a whole group of guys from WME this year, all Chicago people. went off to all of the World Series games because the Chicago Cubs were playing. And among the people with whom they went was the guy who runs, the chairman of WME. They bonded in a way that the women who didn't get invited to go to the ball game didn't have a chance to bond. So for those of us who really want to build a career and don't really have a lot of time to whine about, how we were left out and the boys didn't let us play, and we have to build our own networks. We have to make our own relationships. And the best way to do that, I think, is by creating your own integrity, being that person that people can rely on. So does that mean as women, we have to volunteer more? We have to stay a little later? We need to take on that additional job? We need to work at the things that, for men sometimes come a little easier just in the social navigation? Yeah, it does. We do have to do that. I often tell this story about my first job and that dreadful litigation situation. So I was the only woman at the law firm, and the head of litigation would get up and he'd start walking, and all of the associates would walk behind him, and I would walk behind him, and he would walk into the men's room, and they would walk into the men's room, and I would stand outside the men's room. I didn't really particularly want to watch him pee. The guys, I guess, did. And it's a funny story, but it is, it's a true story. And so, that probably wouldn't happen today. Probably today I might just have walked into the men's room with them. I don't know. But we have to find our own way of building relationships. And I can say, in my business, in my industry, it's really important to be very good at what you do, to be very diligent, but perhaps equally important, certainly equally important, is to have the relationships that you're going to need. Those relationships that mean you are, if you're representing talent, as I did for a brief period of time, people are going to recommend clients to you because they know they can trust you and they like you. If you are, running a studio as I do now, I know that projects are going to come my way, writers and actors are going to come my way because of relationships that we've built over the years, and because people know that they can trust me and their clients are going to be safe.
Lauri, you said something in the breakout earlier about kind of relationship building in the boardroom that struck me. You were talking about sort of early experience, I think, on the board at Gap, and sort of learning the difference between coming in, speaking your mind in a way that might seem like you're confronting people versus sort of coming at it a different way and trying to convince people. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little more for the broader audience and like what that really looks like on the ground and the different approach.
So, I think what you're going to hear from all of us, you're going to hear things that don't necessarily align. And that's my first thing, is just that, it's very, very situational. So, my experience at a law firm in construction, then going to Gap and working for, a truly kick-ass woman who just, literally came to work as if she could have cared less if she got fired and said whatever was on her mind. So I was in this environment surrounded by a ton of women, by the way, at Gap. So there was a lot of that. And honestly, in terms of kind of like building relationships, I go back to just if there has to be authenticity behind it. I don't like when I'm approached and it's like, hey, can you help me get on a board? I'm like, I don't even know your name. So if you go back to kind of building and performing, Sandra alluded to this, it's all about the performance. And when you do that, paying attention to the relationships you're building is really important. So I'll get to your question here, but just to step back, I think, I remember at Gap, we went through, so most of the time I was there, I never, ever asked for a raise, never asked for a promotion. I just worked my tail off and had a hell of a lot of fun. And got promoted, and I never really thought about it. Like, I really want to be the GC, I just didn't really think that way. And then we had a new CEO come in, and very, very different environment. And I remember talking to this executive coach, and we got feedback from all of the executive leadership team, and I sat on that, and I was like shaking in my shoes, like this is not Kansas. You know, like I am not in my element at all anymore. It was very hierarchical, very, you know, speak when you're spoken to, and all of that. And I went in and I got like really good feedback from my peers, and it was all about the relationships. And when you're a GC at a big company, like you are in a very, very unique position that you need to leverage in terms of connecting the dots and helping, you know, if one brand's having a problem with the vendor and trying to kind of solve that throughout and really elevate everything up. But anyway, this coach, she's giving me all this feedback, and I said, you know, I just feel like I'm surrounded now by all these executives that like are just going like this all the time. Like, I want to be promoted, and I want to run real estate, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. And I said, that's just not me. I'm just not going to do that. And her response, which I have never forgotten, was, Lauri, grow up. Grow up. Yeah, get yourself in the game. And if you want something, say you want it. And I had a really hard time even articulating to myself what I wanted, because I was just trying to do whatever they needed, whatever I felt, you know, propelled the business forward. And I think you do that in your own way, but what I learned from that is doing it with a business purpose in mind. I want to run real estate because here's what I think I can do for it. Not, I want to run real estate because I want a promotion and I want more money. So segue to the board, again, situational, even within one company, where dominant, older white male board. I sat in there for years, and they all loved me, and you know, put their arm around me and call me kiddo and all of that, you know, and I started talking more in board meetings and such. But when it came to, in the first one that sorry for those of you who are on the panel, but it just felt sometimes I would get so frustrated with just what would come out of their mouths, and not because they were mean-spirited, but because they just were not politically correct for whatever reason, or just not, it just hadn't been. We had one board member from Arkansas, and it just like, are you kidding me? Did you really say that? And I learned over time that saying, are you kidding me? Versus, so when it came to women on boards, I took an approach of like, well, duh, you know, we have a few customers who are women, like, come on, let's get some board members who are women. That was the wrong approach. It didn't have impact at all, and in fact, we ended up putting a woman on the board, and it was not successful. And that was used against me over and over. Well, this person didn't work. I'm like, what does this person have to do with this slate of 4 candidates? But what I really learned is how to impact and just to take it down, you know, take it down a notch and kind of think, if I want to make them feel safe. They're not bad people, right? You have to kind of go in with that assumption. How do I make them safe? How do I make them realize that this is actually going to benefit everybody, including them? And they could be the champions of this. And they could, if I know this sounds bad, let's make them look really good for putting a few women and a few diverse people on the board. And that actually was what I think got us to the point where we started getting people of color and women on the board. And that was only accelerated after I left and Michelle took over and took that on as well.
One thing that, you know, of course, comes up all the time is mentorship and the importance of mentorship. I think everyone agrees that it's very important, but sometimes the how to do it, how to get a mentor, how to have an effective mentoring relationship, or that can be a little bit more elusive. So I would love to hear from each of you on sort of some of the mentors you've had in your life that were really impactful, and then maybe after that we can talk about sort of how you view now that you're in the, you know, mentor role yourself.
Sure, I can talk about, you know, I think for folks, I always ask the question, you know, do you really want a structured mentor relationship, or really think about it as, you know, everybody you meet, whether it's in the company that you're with or personal relationships, are there things about that person that you really would like to emulate or aspire to do better, to be more like them? So for me, I kind of think of it for myself, what's been really effective have been those relationships where, first of all, I have good trust relationships with them. And then I also think about other relationships where They might not even know my name, but I see how they actually are very effective in influencing. And those are the people I try to emulate. It's how do they influence, right? And try to learn that playbook. So to me, mentorship starts with kind of what is it that you want to learn? Always curious about how to be more effective. And then second of all, from the other side, I've been a mentor to many people. And the ones that really, not the ones that say, I want you to be my mentor, but the ones who actually show a real drive and a real caring about not only themselves, but for others. I think, those people that are really authentic versus somebody who's like, how do I get to the next promotion? Without thinking that they have to actually put in the hard work, build the relationship, and so forth. So I think as a mentee and somebody who would like to be essentially mentored, I think you have to really show authenticity and curiosity and wanting to actually succeed and put in the hard work. Because I've given advice to people where they say, oh, that's a lot of work, and then you're like, okay, well, you asked for the advice, so.
I'm just speaking for myself. I think that's a very good point about learning from everybody that you admire, that you might want to emulate. But I actually did have a mentor, and for me it was really invaluable because the entertainment business, as I said, is a business of relationships, and most of the people who are running the business, most of the people at the top, certainly until recently, as I was coming up in the business, those guys were men, and they were a club, and you needed somebody to introduce you to that club. Now, I was very fortunate. I worked for a guy, John Feldheimer, who I am still working for almost 33 years later, who really was a mentor to me. I was able to watch what he did and how he did it and learn what I liked and what I didn't like and what would serve me well and what wouldn't. Because, as I often say to people that I mentor, watch what I do, don't necessarily follow what I do. It might not fit you. This is my style. It might be great, it might not be you. So take from me what you can, and that's what I did with John. I learned loyalty, I learned honesty, I learned devotion, I learned relationships, I learned hard work, I learned listening to other people. The most important thing I think I learned from him was there is no good deal in which both parties don't walk away feeling like they got most of what they wanted. Maybe not everything they wanted, but most of what they wanted. A good deal is a win-win deal. And that stood me very, very well in my career. And it's something that I try and teach the people who work for me and people that I mentor. But the other thing that he did do for me was introduce me to clubs. No, he didn't take me golfing, but I don't know how to golf, so wouldn't have done any good. But did invite me into every meeting and invited me to speak my mind and to express my opinion and my point of view, and made it clear that my point of view was valuable and was valid and needed to be heard as much as anybody else's point of view. And I think that is the most important thing that anybody can give you, is your voice and confidence in your voice. So for me, having a mentor, still having a mentor, there's still times when I have to say to him, can you take me with you to blank? I want to meet so-and-so. Or he will say, I think you ought to be on the board of the people you should know who are on that board, and will introduce me in that way. And after, I've been doing this for 35 years, you still need help. you need help in your career, and you need help to be able to pay it forward to people coming up behind you. Because one of the things that I had discovered over many years was that women typically, historically, it is changing, but historically, women did not go out of their way to help other women. I don't know if it was partly that I'm so glad I was invited to the party, I can't really invite a friend. You know, they have been reluctant to help women along the way. And that, one of the great things that I'm seeing in the past several years, certainly my business, as more and more women are rising through the ranks and running companies, I am seeing a greater willingness on their part to embrace and to mentor and promote other women, help them along.
Well, I couldn't agree more with what both have said so far, and I think just the word that sticks with me is just really emulating. I never personally found formal mentorship relationships that helpful, whether I was the mentor or the mentee, but again, just being very conscious and purposeful about emulating behaviors and styles, leadership styles, and confidence that you might not have. And so, like, I just felt transformed at Gap over the years, honestly. And I know I say to people, some of whom are in this room, I'm like, yeah, I used to be so submissive, or I'm really submissive, and I'm just, you know, and they're like, give me a break, like, come on, you know. But no, seriously, and I think one of the things I learned early on, emulating the woman at Gap, who I worked for many, many years, is she always gave me feedback in the moment. That's mentorship, right? And I remember once saying, I always know where I stand with you. You know, you really, you just give me that feedback. It's negative, you know, negative, but I get it and I can move on. She's like, I've never given you negative feedback. It wasn't negative to her. It was just the coaching. That's mentorship. That's the beauty of kind of being that. And I remember thinking how important that was to me. And I am just like a fierce advocate of people I work with when I think that they have value to add and aren't seeing it in themselves. And I think that's something, again, that you can leverage. I really still to this day stink at self-advocacy, but I will advocate, you know, fiercely for a lot of other people. And I think we can kind of, you know, certainly trade on that amongst, you know, all of us.
For people in the audience who are like in an earlier stage of their career where they're really in the mentee side of the relationship, like, what advice do you guys have to them in terms of like how they can show up in that relationship in a way that's going to be effective and helpful? I'm sure you guys have your own mentees sort of now. What are the ways that you find it sort of helpful, more or less helpful, to kind of have those relationships be really valuable?
Well, I'll start off. I think just, you know, own your own development. I've always told people that. Well, it's like, my boss hasn't given me feedback in 6 months or a year. I'm like, and, you know, how many times have you tried to get in there? And just really owning it and seeking feedback, you know, from everybody. Start with that one.
Yeah, I could not agree more. You know, I always say to people, your career shouldn't be more important to me than it is to you. You need to ask for what you need. And I think it's a little bit of a sort of a takeoff on your point. Women are not as comfortable. I don't know if we're raised differently. We're not as comfortable about asking for what we need, and so we're often disappointed. We have to learn to accept a little bit of disappointment and a little bit of rejection, but it is really important to actually know what you want and be able to express what you want.
I want to say, as a woman of color in particular, and I think the statistics show that we just want to do a great job and be recognized by it without necessarily having to say, look at me, I did a great job. And I think we really need to, I mean, women to start with, you know, we just want to be recognized. And I think many women of color in particular who I've talked to find that to be even sort of doubly uncomfortable to go beyond the clubs and actually self-advocate. So first of all, develop those relationships so you have sponsors who are actually saying, putting in the few good words behind closed doors, because there will be conversations about you and you want those to be positive, right? And then the second of all is people don't know really what you do and how well you did without you telling them. And there are ways to do that. And one of the greatest ways is to actually share praises about other people on a project that you might have worked with a lot of people to show visibility of what you're doing, but you're giving praise to other people. And also, honestly, the third for me is raising your hand to do those stretch assignments, and the ones that are really, nobody wants to do them because it's really ugly and horrible. And I've done that. Actually turns out to be the biggest blessings because you figure out a way and people are very thankful for those. And I think if you are, somebody starting with your career, just think about those three things: is develop those relationships so people are going to be saying good word about you. So do a great job always, and when you make a commitment, make sure you make the commitment. I'll just share a quick story. Through Association with Corporate Counsel, we sponsor a program called Street Law. So in Orange County, where I was for many years, I volunteered to co-teach with UC Irvine law students. And there were significant differences among those law students, those who actually took an opportunity and really sort of did a great job and used the opportunity to essentially have a mentorship relationship with me, returned phone calls, showed up, wrote thank you notes to say thank you for dinner, various things. And then there are others just blew me off. And I thought, wow, how, they really lost a valuable opportunity. The ones who, did a great job, I know that if I run into them again, I'm going to help, them. The others, not so much. So I'm just giving you an example of where even as a law student, the developing the relationship and taking commitment seriously is really important.
Before we finish, I wanted to give the audience a chance to ask any questions they may have.
What is one thing you would do differently if you had it to do all over again and you were graduating from law school tomorrow?
Nobody told me, even if you were a transactional lawyer, you could and should apply to be a clerk, and it's just one of those things. It's like I didn't have anybody in my network telling me, and I wish I had. So.
Well, good, jumped in, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, go.
The two words that jumped into my hair: go wide, and just allow yourself to explore and really go beyond what you think you're capable of. Men are so good at focusing on their potential and getting there versus women where we go, oops, I only have X, Y, and I can't do Z at all. So, you take yourselves out of the running. So just really go wide in terms of kind of, I think career pathing. The other thing I was going to mention, I was going to say this earlier, is I kind of came up when we think about kind of mentorship and, who we want to emulate and how we want to show up wherever we are. So some of us are in toxic environments and some of us are in great environments. Regardless, I would suggest that you be very purposeful, thinking through kind of what you value. So I came up with this thing: when you're in a culture, again, whether it's positive or toxic, and what's the extent to which I want to adapt, right? So when we got a new leader at Gap, I didn't particularly, it was super hard transition for me. How much do I want to adapt? How much do I want to take on and emulate those behaviors? How much do I want to adopt, or how much do I just want to kind of deal with it versus adopt? Am I going to adopt certain styles or behaviors? And I saw that at Gap over the years. We brought in some people later on in my career there who were awful people. Some women, by the way, who absolutely were out not to promote women at all. And I watched in horror women and men adopt those behaviors because that's what she expected. She was the president of one of our brands. She was just an awful human being, in my opinion. And I thought, whoa. And I thought, why aren't these people rebelling? Why aren't they, it's like, because that's their job. They got families to feed. They have all this, starting up. And then I get to kind of, can you influence? If you don't want to adopt, you can adapt. That's pretty miserable over time, right? So then how can you influence or impact some change by challenging, and however you challenge is dependent on the environment. And then the last is reject. I ultimately left Gap for a whole host of reasons. I loved my team. I loved the company. I got tired of some of my peers, and it wore me down, and it wasn't bringing me joy anymore. And so I left. Terrifying. I reverted to that woman who just was, like, I'll never be able to find anything to do. Who's going to hire me? And, I had those friends, mentors, role models around me going, you're going to be fine. Grow up. That's what I needed. And, it was painful. And I'm so glad I just, jumped in and shook it up.
I'm sitting here thinking about your question, like what would I have done differently? And I can't really think of anything. Not that I have not made some terrible decisions, because I have made terrible decisions, but a lot of building a career and developing the right career for you is trying different things, trying on things, and then discarding them if they don't fit. And if you hadn't made, at least for me, if I hadn't made some of those really bad decisions, I might not have found, the thing that did fit. I was an entertainment lawyer in private practice for a period of time. I liked my clients. I wanted to do really well for them. I wanted them to succeed. And I quit because what I really discovered was I like making things. I like making fantasy. I like making television. That's what I wanted to do. And it was more important for me to try and build a career that would allow me to focus on a project and focus on a production rather than just focus on the particular career of one actor who played a role in that production. I didn't dislike that job, it just didn't suit me. And left without another job, which maybe I did regret that. Should have had a job. But, I think particularly for the law students or those of you who are just starting out in your career, you don't have to be so smart, you don't have to be so decisive, you don't have to know all the answers. You don't necessarily even, it's fantastic if you know exactly what you want to do, but it is not necessary. I kissed a lot of frogs before I found the right career for me. So.
Audience question.
Yeah, so one thing I'm hearing from all of the stories is that careers are long, right? So you might start off one place, you'll end up somewhere else. Right now I'm 7 years in and you feel like you're kind of in the trenches, but it's really not. And so where do you, and a lot of the stories I'm hearing, you started in a legal-centric role and then shifted at some point in your career to a more business-centric role. And so where can you pinpoint a part in your career where you're like, okay, I think now, one, I have the skills to move more business to a more business-centric role, and how do I convince those around me that I'm not just a lawyer and I can take on responsibilities that are more business-focused? Maybe if you're competing with a position with somebody who's been in marketing their whole career, maybe not have a legal background.
Are you currently in a company or with a law firm?
I'm at a law firm.
Okay.
And yeah, I do have a business background, so I did the joint program. I actually love being a lawyer, and plan to stay as partner at my firm, but maybe something interesting for others.
See, my industry is a little easier because, at least when I was starting out, one started in a legal department, and you were drafting contracts and giving production legal advice and interfacing with labor and litigation, and you were learning all of the do's and don'ts and hows of the business through the legal side. And then it was a natural progression. It was not at all uncommon for people after 2 or 3 years in a legal department to transition into business affairs. There are those people who loved practicing law and loved being in the legal department and created an entire career in that legal department. But there was a more accepted path. So you were, thought to be capable of moving into business affairs, even though you didn't have any business background. In other professions, you don't necessarily have as clear a trajectory.
Just 2 quick points. One is, I find that the outside lawyers, there is the difference between the ones who really get the business concerns and risks that I'm facing, as well as my company's facing, and they really stand out. So I would advise, if you're still going to continue on that path in the private law firms, is to really try to think about how to see it from the client's perspective and the business risks and the business or practical aspects of it, and how it interrelate holistically, the particular project or the particular case to the rest of their business. And I think that really stands out to me for outside counsel. And I think in that way, maybe that kind of also gives you an entree, potentially, if there's something that's opening in that particular company that you support, to get into that role. And then once you're in-house, I think that there are many opportunities to work in a matrix way with many different departments. And I think it's up here in the mind. It's not just, I'm a lawyer, but you're also thinking that I am capable and I want to, and learn about all the different aspects of how a particular matter affect the different levers of the business success, and really learn the language of business. So frankly, doesn't even matter what industry. So there are many opportunities for you to actually use your MBA however you choose. The world is, it's a very long runway for you.
So just to build on that thing, when I was at Gap, I would always just say, I don't ever want you to give legal advice. This is what I said to a bunch of lawyers, right? You tell them what you would do if it was you. Learn that business, be passionate about that business, understand the objective, don't tell them no. Tell them how to get there and help them get there and make decisions with them, not just throw over the bow kind of the legal advice. And that goes to relationships, right? You want to be in bed with people, so to speak, but just to really have that connectivity. One other thing I would mention with your question is just in terms of kind of the development, and again, something that I got better at is you take out a sheet of paper and you put on the one side, what am I really good at? And what we tend to do is we stick to that. We say, well, I'm really good at it. But we never ask ourselves, or at least I didn't for many, many years, what brings me joy, and what do I really enjoy, and what's going to bring me passion? Every single one of us deserve to have fulfilling careers. And it doesn't mean every day is beautiful. It's not, right? There's a lot of stuff. But when you look back, now in my ripe old age, when you look back, it's like, wow, that was really fun. We all deserve that. And I think just kind of crossing that line and looking not just what am I good at, what am I potentially good at? And how does that align with what I think would be fun, and what do I want to go for? And then just start experimenting and looking at stuff, even if you do nothing with it. Spend an hour a week on your own development, an hour a week going, if I just had to have the perfect career, what would I do? A board member at Gap actually taught me that one, and he said, Lauri, I know you want to sit on boards. I need more from you. You go back and you do your homework. Give me 10 companies. I said, well, I'd love to be on Starbucks board. They're never going to have me. He's like, I don't care. Put Starbucks on there. And that's going to teach me something about you. I can't help you until you do that. So you just allow yourself to kind of cross that line over to what's going to bring you joy over the years.
Thanks, you guys. This is really great.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Lauri, Lily, Sandra, and Megan, for all the sage advice. We have some concluding remarks from the Dean of our law school, Jennifer Monokin.
As Dean Mnookin joins us on stage, let's leave here today committed to each other and committed to be the catalyst for change that we want to see for women in the legal profession. Without further ado, please welcome Dean Mnookin.
Thanks, everybody. And really, I'm just here to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of what today was. Thank you for making UCLA and UCLA Law Women Lead matter. And I hope that everyone in this room got something out of today and is leaving with some tip, some piece of wisdom, some new connection, some networking opportunity, some new way of thinking about how they speak in public or their career. And I hope it was, I know it was worth your time and energy. Really, I'm just here to say a series of thank yous today. I want to thank our firms and corporations and individual donors who helped to make today possible. I want to thank our event co-chairs. I don't know if they're in the room, but Kara Horwitz and Maggie Levy, are you here? Let's give them a round of applause because they are both extraordinary and did amazing work for today. I want to thank every lead board member. If you're a lead board member, raise your hand. You rock. Let's give you a round of applause. I want to thank Chris Brancaccio. Is he here? I don't know if he's here, but on the law school side, he helped hugely with logistics. And yeah, is he there? Raise your hand. Let's give you a round of applause. Supporting women's empowerment. You don't have to be a woman to be an ally in that project. And then there's one person who did more than any other single individual to make today happen. She is the co-chair with the fabulous Michelle Banks of the lead board. But this was her baby on top of everything else she does in her extraordinarily busy life. She thought through this from the big picture to the littlest detail. She was writing emails at 1 in the morning and then again at 6 in the morning. And without her, this would not have been, certainly would not have been the event that it was and might not have been at all. So I think we should all give an enormous round of applause to the absolutely amazing Nancy A. Bell. My hat is off to you, if I had one. And finally, okay, who's already on the LEAD network? Who has signed up? Raise your hand. If your hand is not up and you are a UCLA student or alum, that's what you're going to go do right after you leave here, right? So I am so proud that the LEAD network is part of who we are at UCLA. I hope that you will be back more often than the next LEAD Summit, but I have no doubt that you will be back for the next LEAD Summit. Thank you so much for being here today.